Is it possible to paint smooth and contrasted Space Marine in under 1 hour? Well, let's find out painting these 5 Space Marine chapters using the sponge chop technique. And today we paint the best chapter, my chapter, Dark Angels. I start with a base coat of black green. The goal here is make them not look like salamanders. Like always, I'm gonna start with an underpainting using makeup sponges. Here we have to do the most important thing in mini painting, mapping, highlights, and shadows. Imagine in a frontal light, I'm gonna hit just the panels that face light, and I'm gonna stop and start blending with the sponge as soon as the surface turns away from the light. If you're struggling finding volumes on your miniature, it's because you're used to general and pretty useless tips. So download my volume cheat sheet down below. I'll show you how to turn volumes into planes, which you can then paint easily. Step 3, I'm gonna use Black Templar plus Eldari Emerald for that perfect phthalo green Dark Angels. Some paints are more pigmented and need to be thin. This is the case. I am thinning my black and emerald, and I am applying 2 layers, because if I were to rush through this, do only 1 thick layer, I would create a lot of staining, and we don't want that, do we? So I am applying 2 thin layers, brushstroke always downwards toward the shadows, because the most pigments deposit at the end of the brushstroke. Try to use the whole length of the brush and go section by section. Here I'm just gonna take care of some stupid details I just want to skip through when I do army painting. Metallic, the red, blah 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 blah, boring. And then we move on to the actual fun part that's gonna 10x the look of your model. Step 4, we're gonna use a detail brush to stipple in some iced yellow in the most lit areas. In this step, you're gonna have to trust me. We are gonna create chalkiness, but the next step is gonna erase that. Step 5, we're gonna take some sap green from the scale 75 artist range, mix it with some black, thin it out pretty good, and then applying it to the areas we just painted. That green will and we will totally erase that chalkiness and that ugly ew. And potentially here you could go on and on and on, covering less and less using thicker paint and just upping that contrast, and it's gonna look pretty great. So what do you think? Again, it's here, so we're not waiting for it anymore, but I'm continuing the series with a very requested chapter, Black Templars. Starting off with a makeup sponge, I choose the main viewpoint of the model and I start creating my gradients directly on the black primer. I'm using a neutral gray. That's because I wanted my Black Templars to be kind of purplish or violetish lily. So I wanted a blank canvas for my underpainting. The goal here is just to do a general underpainting, because we're gonna do the actual light study in the next step, where I'm gonna use a lighter gray to highlight the planes of the model that are facing the light. When these planes turn, I stop and I start blending with my makeup sponge, wicking off the excess and blending by managing the consistency. You can see in this phase the volume really pop up and start looking pretty good. The key to understanding highlight placement is understanding not just the shapes, but the planes as well. I have a cheat sheet you can download in the description or in my bio, or you can check out my course. It's 4 hours and 30 minutes of in-depth content that makes highlight placement feel effortless. Check it out. Remember, I have to feed the cat. This is all about the cat. Can someone think about the cats? Next, I mixed 2 inks together, black and violet. Why didn't I use Black Templar? Because Black Templar is bluish. I wanted violetish. I just used matte medium for my inks to flow, and I just tested on the back to see how I like it. You can choose how much you want it to stain. My suggestion is a couple of slightly thinner layers. The next step is what is gonna make this Black Templar. I'm gonna take pale gray and start stipple on the maximum point of highlight in very small areas. It stuns me every time how much these lap chopped layers can actually erase the texture that you leave while blending, the chalkiness, all that shitty stuff. Just a good method. Next, again, I reapply my mix. You can see the effect of the violet is very subtle. I wanted to read black with a hint of maybe ambient violet lights. After that, I was pretty much done. Shoulder pads, the decals, all that boring stuff. The sword I actually painted just one side of it. So what can I say? And this is the final result. What do you think? This week's chapter is Imperial Fists. Starting out with a base coat with dirty red. Armageddon is almost here, but where's my early copy? Games Workshop.
I feel like you don't love me as much as I do.
I then continue with step 2, doing an underpainting using a sponge. This step is very important because it allows me to study the geometry of the model. Space Marine armor is amazing practice for learning volumetric highlighting, which is what makes our model realistic. On Space Marine, you mainly have spheres for the head and backpack, balls, cylinders for arms and legs, and finally 2 shapes combined for the shoulder pads. Trick of being accurate is not just knowing the shapes, but also understanding which plane of the shape is facing the light and which is not. I have just launched a full 4.5 hours course on highlight placement. So if you're tired of struggling with that, check the link in the description down below. And remember, this is all for the cat. My cat needs merloots, okay? Okay, moving on. Using the right consistency and pressure, makeup sponges are super valid substitute for airbrush. Look at this underpainting, quite beautiful. And here's where I forgot what I wanted to do and started applying the yellow without even pressing play. Step 3, I forgot. This time I wouldn't apply directly the yellow, but instead apply an orange mixing yellow and red. The idea was to achieve warmer yellow because even if it's pretty smooth and even if the underpainting is warm, this yellow alone will appear much colder. And I wanted it warmer. This mix is misbehaving quite a bit. Don't touch it too much or it will leave streaks like this. So after I was done with this, I blocked some of the black and red parts of the model. I was already pretty late, so I quickly moved on to step 4, where I stippled on some ice yellow on the most solid areas. I also aim to cover a little bit of the yuck staining yet going on the previous step. I'm gonna rebuild some of those volumes with relaxed brush strokes, not worrying about the chalkiness, but just covering as much as possible the staining. I aim to have the max point of highlight with higher opacity and the nearby areas more transparent in order to create that nice transition. Step 5, I then slap on the yellow covering the sipping layer and voila, you got a beautiful saturated Imperial Fist. This time I only have 5 minutes left on the timer just because I made a lot of mistakes, but this scheme is still doable in a very short time frame, especially if you're batch painting. Just fill in those stupid details and you're good to go. Is it possible to paint smooth and contrasted Space Marines in under 1 hour? Well, let's find out while we wait for Armageddon to come out. And of course, we begin with Blood Angels. So I'm gonna start by applying just general base coat. Then I'm gonna use this $2 tool to mark the highlight spots on my mini. In order to have good looking models, the only thing that you have to do is to paint light. And here I imagine my light source coming from frontal above the model, highlighting the planes that face the light. You can find a cheat sheet in the link in the description about planes and volumes and how to actually understand it. So check that out. You can see that sponge tends to create that gritty texture, but don't worry because every time we apply paint with the point of the sponge, we're going to use the side that it's actually clean to lightly tap and kind of get rid of unwanted texture. Also, the next step I'm about to show you will get rid of any remaining texture, giving you effortless smoothness. In step 3, here I'm using Blood Angels Red. I thin it down a little bit, trying to go panel by panel and smooth out every kind of texture that I made with a sponge. The next step is what actually is gonna your model. We're gonna just take our detail brush, light orange plus pale yellow, thin it down a bit and start randomly stippling it on the parts of the panels that face the light the most. Here on the helmet, on the top of the shoulder pad, on the top of the D-pads, blah, 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 blah. You would just need to sketch the brightest spot using low opacity paint, which means making sure you thin down the paint slightly and you unload the brush, leaving just a small amount on it. I know it looks weird, trust me, the next step is gonna make everything smooth. Final step is to take a deep red, thinning it down using matte medium. Because we used that thinner consistency and the opacity was lower, this kind of glaze, it's gonna automatically blend those transitions for you. From here, you're gonna use the ultimate army painting trick, not giving much shit about the rest of the model. Black, the other details, some metallics, ester paste, pigments, and I was done. See you next week, maybe. Continuing this series with Wolfies. Here I do a quick base coat with Oxford Blue. Again, here I'm gonna use a makeup sponge to mark the highlight areas. I just choose a view angle and start highlighting the areas facing the light. When the form I'm highlighting turns away from the light, I stop. and I started using different moisture level of the sponge to clean up and smooth out the transition. And since I'm going very slow, using lower consistency and being really careful to smooth the texture of the sponge, because you guys didn't like it last time, this is gonna take a bit longer. I also do this because with lighter colors, I can't really use the slap chop method. I tried it, but it didn't work. So I need to directly layer the colors using the sponge, which basically means that I'll need to be really careful in order not to create the texture, because I cannot hide that under any contrast paint. The more I use makeup sponges, the more I'm convinced that these are the best tool for miniature painting ever. Very cheap, very effective, love it. I then move on to another layer of lighter blue, and as you can see, it's perfectly possible to make sponges smoother using lower consistency and a couple layers. If you feel like you still don't understand consistency, download the cheat sheet I have listed in the link down below or on my bio if you're watching this on other social or something. For the shoulder pads, hair, and skin, I couldn't use blue to sketch on the highlights, so I just stippled in some decomposed flesh with my detail brush. So then I can slap on some yellow, which is my favorite contrast paint ever. But don't worry, because you can totally avoid that and keep those details flat, because they're gonna have the chapter markings anyway. The final step is kind of a contrast layer slash wash to enrich the recesses and make them darker and dull down a little bit the scheme. Then I take care of the boring details and we are done. Always under 1 hour. In retrospect, the only thing I regret is using a bare head. So what do you think? So now you know you can paint really fast using this very cool tool. But what if you want more? What if you still struggle with where to place the highlight? Don't worry, Johnny, because I have a compilation here that I built just for you. Contains a lot of videos about this topic. So check this out and I'll see you there. You'll see past me there because it's compilation. Long time ago, I would say. I'm out.